What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue here with my 2024 college football schedule preview and projected record series. The Florida Gators are up next before we preview their schedule for 2024 and give them an early projected record based on how tough their schedule is. Let's take a look back at what Florida did in 2023. Here were my projections and predictions last year for the Florida Gators. My projection had them at 6-6, and then my prediction for this team was also 6-6, but Florida was just under that compared to my projection and predictions last year. Florida coming off a 5-7 season in 2023. A lot of Florida fans think this was a very disappointing season here for the Gators, but really wasn't just about the overall record here for Florida. Yes, they went 5-7, but it was really about the schedule last year that Florida played in 2023, and here was that schedule last year for Florida. You look at their non-conference schedule. They had to play a couple of Power 5 teams for last year in the non-conference, had to play Utah on the road to start things out, and then they, of course, had that Florida State game at the end of the year on November 25th, and they also had a very tough schedule in the SEC. They played on the road at Kentucky. They played Georgia, of course, in Jacksonville, played LSU on the road, Missouri on the road as well. So, yeah, they had a very tough SEC schedule. And then you look at the 5 losses last year, or I should say the other losses coming here to Florida in the SEC. They lost on the road at Kentucky. They lost to Georgia here in Jacksonville, lost to Arkansas there, and then LSU and Missouri both on the road. And then they lost to Florida State as well here in the non-conference, and then also Utah. So, again, 7 losses last year for Florida, 5 wins. You know, they started out pretty well in the season, and then the schedule got very tougher down the stretch. And then from that stretch from October 28th to November 25th, that's where the schedule just got really absolutely brutal for Florida. So, again, a 5-7 season in 2023. Let's now look ahead to 2024. Here is the schedule for Florida for the upcoming season. Before we go game by game, let's take a look at who Florida will play in the non-conference this upcoming season. So you look at their non-conference schedule. They will, of course, play Miami here in the non-conference out of the ACC. That'll be a home game there to kick off the season in week number 1 on August 31st. That's going to be a big-time non-conference game there to kick off the season for Florida. And again, the good news about this game is that you get this game at home. If it was on the road at Miami, that would just make it a very tough non-conference game. And then you look at the rest of the games here. They got Samford here in the non-conference, UCF here out of the Big 12. They also get that game at home, and then you got Florida State, of course, here on the road. They do play Florida State every year, of course, because that is their rivalry that they play every single year in rivalry weekend. So another tough non-conference schedule for Florida in 2024, kind of like last year. They will play Miami, of course, to begin the season, Florida State at the end of the year. So you got a couple of ACC teams here, and then you got one Big 12 team in UCF. So you got to play 3 Florida schools here in the non-conference for 2024. So again, a very tough non-conference schedule for the Gators. Let's now go back to the schedule here for 2024. So they will kick things off with Miami, of course, on August 31st. Again, that's a week 1 matchup at home for Florida. Should be a very interesting matchup between these 2 Florida schools. And then they play Samford here after that on September the 7th. And then they open up SEC play here on September the 14th. They will play Texas A&M here at home on September the 14th to open up conference play. And then they go on the road here for the first time on the season to play on the road at Mississippi State on September the 21st. And then Florida gets their bye week here, their first bye week here at the last weekend of the month of September. They come out of the bye week, get to the month of October. They'll play UCF here on October 5th. And then they go on the road to face Tennessee on October the 12th. Then it's Kentucky here at home on October the 19th. And then they get their second bye week here of the season. They do play, of course, Georgia coming out of the bye week to get into the month of November. Of course, that game will be in Jacksonville like it always is every year. That game will be on November 2nd on a neutral site venue. Then they go on the road to face Texas here on November 9th, one of those newcomers coming up in the SEC. And then it's back at home against LSU here on November 16th. Then it's also at home against Ole Miss here on November 23rd. And then finally they do end things out here, and they end things out, I should say, with Florida State here on the road on November 30th. So that is the schedule for Florida in 2024. Another brutal schedule for the Gators. You know, this is another tough schedule this year. It might be one of the toughest in the country. You got Miami, of course, in the non-conference. Florida State, of course, out of the non-conference as well. Couple of ACC teams here, and then you got LSU and Ole Miss, Georgia, Texas, Tennessee on the road. I mean, this is another brutal schedule for Florida, and the good news about this schedule, you don't have to play Alabama, of course, but again, this schedule is just very brutal, to be honest. It might be one of the toughest in the country. But let's get to the projection now for Florida and find out what the projection is going to come out to be based on this schedule. And again, this is not an official prediction. This is simply a projection based on how tough the schedule is. This is the scale I use here for my projections. If it's a 1% game in the red, although that percentage is counted as an automatic loss there in the red, 20% games in the orange are going to be games where there'll be about a couple touchdowns of underdogs, 40% games in the yellow. There'll be a heavy underdog in one of those games and be a heavy underdog game by about a touchdown at 40% in the yellow. 50-50 games will stay in the white. Games I think can go either way. 60% games in the purple are going to be games where Florida will be favored by at least a touchdown. And then the 80% games here in the blue, these are going to be games where Florida will be favored by at least a couple touchdowns and also by double digits. And then 99% games here in the green, these are going to be the easy wins here, the automatic wins here for Florida. So we'll start with those green games for Florida, the easy wins here for the Gators for 2024. When you look at this schedule, though, there's not really any guaranteed wins in the SEC schedule, but there is one guaranteed win, and that is the non-conference game against Samford here on September 7th. This is the only game that I see Florida being favored by at least more than 3 touchdowns, and then also, at least over 95% as well. I mean, that's the only easy win here on this schedule, and that's pretty much the only easy game here on this schedule for Florida throughout the entire rest of the schedule. Again, this is a very brutal schedule for Florida. You may think that UCF game might be a green game, but let's be honest, UCF is going to come out there and compete with Florida. I think they do have the talent to compete with this Florida team as well. And then we move on to the blue and purple games. I don't have any blue or purple games either on this schedule, just because of how tough this schedule is. So let's go to the games now where Florida will be underdogs in. I don't have any red games either on 1% category, but I do have 20% and yellow percent, or like 40% games. So let's start with the orange games, the games where Florida will be about a couple touchdowns of underdogs. And I think you got a couple of them on this schedule. You got Georgia and Texas. These are 2 games that you play in back-to-back weeks here in the month of November. Georgia, I know that's a game in Jacksonville. It should be like a game where Florida has like a really good chance to win, but let's be honest, Georgia has dominated Florida now in the last few years. I don't really see them competing in this game as of right now. We saw that, tempo from last year with Georgia. Their offense just very explosive, and, the defense just could not get really any big stops on the Florida defensive side of the football. And Georgia's offense was just too good. The defense was just too good, and the talent on this roster is just too good as well for Florida. I don't think Florida is on the level of Georgia like they used to be, so I think that game is going to be like a game where Florida will be about a couple touchdowns of underdogs. If this game was on the road in Athens, I would definitely put it in the red, but it is a neutral site game, so that's the reason why I'm putting it here in the orange. And then Texas here on the road, that's a very tough place to play. I do expect Texas to be really good in their first year in the conference. They do have the talent on the roster. Quinn Ewers will be back, of course, at quarterback. And playing on the road, that's the reason why I'm putting this game in the orange, and also based off of how Texas played last year. So, again, those are the couple games where I think Florida will be about a couple touchdowns of underdogs. We go to the games now in the yellow, the games where Florida will be about a heavy underdog game by about a touchdown. They do have a chance to probably win some of these games, but maybe not quite. But I got 4 of them on this schedule. Tennessee on the road, LSU, Ole Miss both at home, and then Florida State here on the road as well. So all 4 of these games, I think Florida will be about a heavy underdog in by about a touchdown. I think they'll at least compete in these games. But still, I think all these teams that you're seeing in the yellow are going to be favored at least by a touchdown against this Florida team. Tennessee on the road here in Knoxville is a very tough environment. I know Florida beat them last year. It should be a 50-50 game. But I think Tennessee, did finish the season better than Florida. And, Tennessee has a really good, talented roster, and they're going to have that hurry-up offense that might wear down the defense of Florida. And then LSU, Ole Miss, you get both of these games at home. But again, the talent is just there for both of these teams. I think they're more talented here than Florida here on the rosters and everything. I know LSU and Ole Miss are home games for Florida. Not saying they're going to win them. I think they do have a chance to win these 2 games. But again, I think LSU and Ole Miss are better teams than Florida. And then Florida State, I know that's a rivalry game. You never know what could happen. I know the game was very close last year, but I think Florida State playing at Tallahassee will be a very tough environment here for Florida. And I think playing at home, you can favor at least Florida State by a touchdown in that game. So again, all 4 of these games, I think Florida will be a heavy underdog in by about a touchdown in the yellow. And then the rest of the 5 games, games here: Miami, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, UCF, and Kentucky. These are all games I think can go either way. Miami, a very tough non-conference game to kick off the year, but you get that game at home. Texas A&M, of course, first-year head coach. We don't know how good they're going to be. Mississippi State on the road, another team that has a first-year head coach. We don't know how good they're going to be, but it is on the road. That's the reason why, I made this a 50-50 game. If it was at home for Florida, I would definitely make it a touchdown favorite of a game for the Gators. And then UCF and Kentucky. UCF obviously is a non-conference team. I think they're going to have the talent to compete with this Florida team. And then Kentucky here. If I was going to put this game here, if this game was on the road at Kentucky, I would definitely put it in the yellow. But playing Kentucky at home, that does bode well for Florida, to be honest. But again, 5 games here I think can go either way. I think these are definitely very winnable games for Florida. So let's now get a projected record here for this Florida team for 2024. And again, not my official prediction. This is simply a projection based on how tough the schedule is. So we count that one green game against Samford here as a win, an automatic win here. And then we average out all the orange games here at 20%. You average out all those yellow games at 40%. And then you average out all the 50-50 games here at 50%. And the overall projected record based on this schedule comes out to be 5-7 for Florida in 2024. So same overall record as last year's season in 2023. Not the same projection for me last year, but again, based on this schedule, it's a 5-7 projection here for Florida. I know a lot of Florida fans won't agree with it, but again, this is just how the schedule came out to be here for the Gators. So again, a 5-7 projection here for the Florida Gators for 2024. Let me guys know what you think about this Florida team down in the comments below. What do you think their best case scenario and worst case scenario down in the comments below is? And also give you, like I said, give me your thoughts on this Florida team down in the comments below. And thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports channel.